Hi, I'm Glenn. Welcome to my boat project. In this episode, I'm moving on to the top side. I finished the bottom, I finished the hull, I finished the trailer, and I finished the centerboard twice. So now it's time to do the inside and the top side. And because of the hot weather and the fact that I have to wear a bunny suit when I'm on the inside, I'm going to put that one on pause and do the top side now, where it's a little bit breezier and it's shaded and it's not so bad. So I'm going to be doing a lot of sanding, filling, fairing, and of course painting. So I will show you all that in this episode of my boat project Aquarius. So the first thing I'm going to do is go around with my angle grinder and grind down the pits and the damaged areas and any of the holes I'm going to fill. And then I'll go through with the sander and smooth out all the surfaces except for the anti-slip area. Is that what that's called? Anyways, the roughened areas. And, that could take forever. But eventually I'll prime and paint and, all that stuff. So, ciao.
Well, here's a preview of the kind of work this boat needs. Look at that big old crack. Apparently the boat hit something and it cracked. And here's an area that needs some filling, some holes from, I think it was the bow pulpit was bolted on there. A lot of what you see is dust and dirt because I haven't concerned myself with keeping it clean. Lots of areas are going to need some grinding. And there's some crazing on the gel coat. Like, look at that. All those little black specks are where the gel coat cracked and popped off. And there's a lot of other areas where it hasn't popped off. So it has to be sanded, ground, any place there's some damage, cracks, or holes. I filled pretty much every hole in the top side of the boat, except those that I knew 100% that I was going to reuse. But even if I thought I was going to reuse it, I still filled the holes just because it's a lot easier to fill it at this point and drill it later. Right there you see a dent. So the boat hit something, put a crack. I ground this out, but there was a crack here. And I followed that crack like a vein of gold. And it went all the way over there. Cover this up with some fiberglass. Pretty big. That's the worst of it though. I'm going to fill some holes that I don't need. There's some sort of gunk in there, some sort of filler. I'm going to put a bigger cleat here, so I'm filling those holes and getting rid of any cracked gel coat I find. The grinder is pretty darn aggressive, so I'm gonna have to go at it with the sander too afterwards and not do everything with the grinder because it's pretty brutal and it makes a lot of dust. Let me let you in on my current consternation. So let's just back up a little bit to what I've done on the top side of my Aquarius 21. I sanded it all down to smooth, which would include, smoothing out any chips and dings and scratches. I prepped and then filled any holes that I didn't want to exist anymore. And then I got to the point where I thought it was all ready. It's all prepared. So I rolled a coat of gray primer over it, and that revealed many areas that needed a little more work. So I put in some more work there. I used a high build primer to fill some low or dippy areas, and also especially where the pinholes are. Those things have always been a problem. Whenever I get below the gel coat, I find bubbles in the original resin. So those need to be filled. And what happens most of the time is the paint or primer just goes over the top of it. So then if I sand, or when I sand, it it will open them up again if I get too low. And unfortunately, I don't know that I'm too low until I get there. So the second thing I did was, after I added more fairing and that thickened epoxy, as I sanded that down all smooth, and then I sprayed white primer all over it. Now, this was kind of a sloppy job, so I knew it was going to need some sanding anyways, but what it revealed was more areas that needed more work. It is so difficult to get something totally smooth when there's all these different colors. So that's why the solid color of the primer really makes it a lot more apparent what needs more work. So this time there was 100 or more pinholes. Now, what I did to work on this, and I was afraid I was going to have to do that as I was sanding to prep for that second coat of primer, I was kind of on the fence about adding the high build primer, because there was some wavy areas and again, pinholes. So I was kind of on the fence, and I figured, well, let me just finish this and see how it looks after I spray primer on it. I don't want to have to do more work than I have to do. So after I sprayed that on, I saw that it needed more work, so I used the rest of my thickened epoxy, or excuse me, not thickened epoxy, but it's the 2-part high build primer from Total Boat, and I put it on the main areas that are most important, pretty much every vertical surface, and count this one that I'm leaning on as vertical, and the little strip along the side, which is kind of like a tow rail, and then the sides along by the windows and back in the cockpit. Well, I didn't want to do that because I knew that it was going to have to require a lot of sanding, and the longer this stuff sits, the harder it gets and the harder it is to sand. So I really didn't want to do that, but I did it. And now that I've done it, and I have all this work ahead of me, especially since I was so close to being able to paint it, and maybe an extra coat of paint with some sanding is all I would have had to do, but now I have a ton of sanding to do, and then of course any imperfections and all that. Here's my consternation. And now that it's too late to do it this way, I have this thought of going through with a itty bitty brush, like a hobby brush or a nail painting brush, and fill all the pinholes, and maybe do some fairing on some areas that were revealed that need it. I think that would have been less work than this. And in fact, as long as this took to apply, I know I could have done those things I just described to you. Filling the pinholes individually and some fairing would have taken as long as applying this. And the sanding would be far shorter. So I'm kind of kicking myself, but then again, maybe I would have done all that work and then found that I still wasn't happy with it. If I were to go back in time, I would not have applied this high build primer when I did. Maybe I would have applied it at the very beginning. That would have been a better idea. Or not at all, because I don't know how well it filled pinholes. I think it just covers them. Sometimes I think I do the wrong thing intentionally so I can self-sabotage. Now, this isn't a psychological video, but I've said all along that I want to share my mistakes with you so you don't have to make them. Now, I don't know that this is a mistake, but I think I would have been okay without the high build primer. Or, like I said, if I had used it right off the bat, that probably would have been the best idea of all. Anyways, I've got all day, and I've got lots and lots and lots of sanding to do, so let's get to it. I'm so excited. This is the kind of texture a roller leaves behind with this high build primer. A brush is even worse, but it all has to be sanded down to smooth.
Still there. These are the roller dimples.
Time to break out the big guns. Hand sanding just isn't cutting it. This is a perfect example of how helpful a guide coat can be. I missed these holes every time I went over it with the sander until I applied that gray coat.
It's a neat pattern. It's almost like camouflage. I might keep it. This is what I should have done in the first place. That high build primer did not help matters. It did not fill these pinholes. I don't think it made anything more smooth, more level, more even, more fair. And it caused a heck of a lot more work, like a full week of more work. I'm here doing some touch-up sanding. Actually, I'm hand sanding the entire surface, everything that I painted. And I'm using a 220 disc with an old sponge. It's an old sanding sponge. And I say it's old because it doesn't have the hard, sharp corners. Hard, sharp corners. And I really like this sponge. I've used it. I use it for when I redid my kitchen cabinets. I've used it for this entire boat. So I really like an old sponge. It hasn't fallen apart yet. Anyway, what I'm learning from going over my painting job is that I need to take more time to make sure that the spray nozzle is exactly the right distance from the surface throughout my entire stroke of painting. Where I was about 12 to 14 inches away, it looks great. Where I was farther away, it's really rough, almost like sandpaper. Not quite as rough as 220, but some of the little sharp little points of the roughness are higher than that too. So I guess that's what it's from, being too far away and the paint drying as it hits the surface. All right, so there's my learning for this little bit.
I almost forgot about the pop top and the lazarette hatch. So I need to get the sanding and the filling and then catch up with the priming and the painting before I'm done with the boat.
Not supposed to breathe it, but I don't want to put my mask back on, so I'll just stir slowly. It's like snow. Fake snow anyways, or that real dry, cold snow. So I had xylene on this rag and I tossed it in here absent-mindedly and it bubbled up my paint all the way down to the primer. I think that stupid mistake just cost me a week. I was about to spray a coat of paint all over the entire boat just now, getting ready to do that, vacuuming and wiping it down, and I discovered this. Well, that's primer, so I guess I can paint over that, but it's going to have this ridge. Wow. That was very stupid. All right, I'm done painting the top side, and I've removed all of the plastic so we can get a good look at it here. A lot of dust. This is where I filled the hole. There was a light here, so I filled that hole. Yes, it is something I should have done before I worked on the hull, before I painted the hull, but I had not decided to do that yet. But this guy's looking really good. This is the hole I filled here. I'm kind of thinking I should have filled that one too. Oh well. I'm happy. She's looking good. The lazarette lid and the pop top are all finished, and I am very happy with the way they look. So this is how the top side of the boat is going to look. And if you notice that black speck on the lazarette lid, that is a mosquito that landed in it while it was still wet, and he dried to it. Applying this tape with a curve is very difficult. It goes in a straight line just fine. If I can put my shadow over it, then I can see the edge there. So otherwise there's actually too much light and I can't see a shadow. Kind of like when you're driving in the snow or skiing in snow. It's snowing. It's those little things I'm trying to avoid. And here I'm using Total Boats, Total Tread for the non-skid areas. The roller covers so much more than a brush does. This is the first time I've used the roller. I was using a brush previously just because it was handy and convenient. I thought it'd be faster and easier, but this is applying more smoothly and taking a lot less paint. Ta-da! There's the cockpit. Looks pretty good. I think it looks really sharp with that yellow tape, but I have to peel it off. And the sooner the better, because if I wait too long, it's gonna pull off the paint with it. The paint that's under it, that is. There was not non-skid in this area before, but I thought it was a really good place that needed it, as I step here a lot. This is my favorite part of painting, is removing the masking. Lines are not as crisp as I thought they would be. Oh no. This is a nice straight line. That feels good. There was not non-slip here before, so this is just what I laid down on top of the gel coat and paint. So I suppose I can trim that up a little bit if I wanted with maybe a razor blade. Can't get in there with the xylene because it'll take off more than I want it to. Oh, she's a beauty. All right, there's my top side. I'm really very happy with the way it turned out. It was pretty frustrating with all of my prep work that I had to do, thinking I'm done and then putting on a layer of primer and finding out that it's not ready to paint. So then I do it again and find out it's still not ready to paint. So essentially I did 3 coats of primer with lots of sanding in between. And there's also some sanding in between coats of paint as well. And so I have a total of 4 coats of paint at most, and it's a little bit thinner in some areas where it got sanded a bit. But A, I ran out of paint, and B, I'm happy with it. I could not have done any better. I was really lucky, really lucky with the weather that it held out. Normally the rains come in mid-September, but I wasn't done painting the top side until mid-October. And fortunately the rains didn't come till later, like the 20th or something like that. So the paint had some time to dry. We had 86 degrees for those past few days, and yay me, I was able to finish that up. Otherwise I just would have had to wait till summer comes again. Spray painting is surprisingly hard. Watching someone do it, especially a professional, makes it look really easy. And even a non-professional can make it look easy until you look at their work and see how it's done. So I'm in that latter category, and I know that I have to keep the brush or the paint sprayer nozzle a certain distance from the surface, like about 14 to 16 inches. I know this, and I was trying to do this, and yet still failed at it in many times. And one of the hard things that I personally have is that you have to move the spray tip at a certain speed, at a consistent speed at that. And I tend to get in this rush mentality. Because I'm moving across the surface quickly, I feel like I have to keep moving quickly over the entire paint job. But really all I have to do is let off on that handle, the trigger, and I can take a deep breath, calm myself down a little bit, and then use nice, calm, even strokes. And that's what I learned on the last coat of paint. That was one of the things I discovered I was doing poorly, was rushing. And so on the last coat of paint, I spent more time being calm and moving the spray nozzle as fast as I needed to, but not too fast, not too far, not too slow, all that. So anyways, it turned out pretty well. I hope I don't lose my touch by the time I have to spray something again, but c'est la vie. All right, so the entire outside of the boat is done with the exception of hardware. Now it's time to move in. I have some holes to fill. I have some reinforcing to do. I have lots of sanding to do, and then of course there's going to be paint and primer, and the piece de la resistance is the furniture. I have to build all new furniture. I'm going to do pretty much the same thing that was original, not completely identical, but you'll see. So come back to my Boat Project Aquarius and see how I put together the inside. Thanks for watching.